Yes, hello, my friends. I hope you had an amazing weekend. It was a very busy one on Twitter. The Twitter files dropped. We've spent a lot of time talking about these issues. Hunter Biden, Twitter, Vijaya, Jack, everybody censoring. All of the most important stories right before the 2020 election. We were on the receiving end of it, so we knew it was going on. And so a lot of this release was stuff that we already kind of speculated was happening, but it was very interesting to peer behind the curtains and see what was really happening, what the emails looked like. All of it disgusting. We're going to break it all down on the show, probably do a whole show on this, because what happened was Elon released this through Matt Taibbi, and he did this tweet thread, but each one of these tweets, you can just go tentacles deep, right? You can sort of a vertical tweet thread, but you can just take one of these and laterally follow it down a rabbit hole, which we'll do. So we'll save that for the show when we can mind map all of this stuff out. What I've been observing over the weekend is whether this is sort of piercing through the bubble. You know, there's this sort of censorship bubble that exists over really most of the world right now. I think that it's only very recently has the right or the truth or the people who want to know what is actually happening, sort of the free speech people, are they only starting to sort of crack the bubble a little bit. But is this story permeating that? You know, on Twitter, yeah, everybody was slam dunking the Twitter files. Everybody was retweeting this thread. There were Twitter spaces that I hopped into. I know many of you were in there listening to the tweets drop one by one. Others were live streaming it. We, of course, did not. But outside of Twitter, right, and outside of sort of the right sphere or the free speech platforms, did this really gain any traction? Don't know. You know, the bubble is pretty strong because other people were hopping on CNN, hopping on MSNBC, checking even some conservative people and platforms and saying, why aren't they commenting on this? It's like this media blackout. Nobody wants to talk about it. And you can imagine why. It's because many of them were responsible for this, right? They sort of created it. It's like when your dog, your animal, your best friend makes a mess on the carpet and you say, look at this. What happened here? You say, what happened to this? Where'd this come from? And your friend Spot over there is, you know, going, oh gosh, I don't know where that came. You know, I think something happened, you know. Yeah, I was responsible for that. But they don't want to talk about it. They go cower in the corner and they're just a little bit nervous and a little bit ashamed of what they've done. And of course, we forgive our best friends and we say, all right, well, you're just a dog. You know, you don't know any better. These people knew better. And they still crapped on the floor. And they served it for all of us. So, of course, they're not going to want to talk about it. You know, CNN and all these places, they're never going to respond and say, yeah, sorry about that. We got it wrong. Right? They were justified. They feel justified in what they've done. And I was thinking about this in terms of marketing costs and marketing expenses. There's this concept in marketing called share of voice. Think about it like a big pie chart. You have, you know, only so much conversation that can take place. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many people in the world. There's only so many hours of a day that they can dedicate to consuming content, right? There's only so much of this. So of all of the political content that people are consuming, if you put it into a giant pie chart, what share of the voice, what slice of the pie does the mainstream bubble comprise, right? The people who don't even hear about any of this stuff. For the people who the Hunter Biden stuff is like ancient history. 2020 is like ancient history. They couldn't give a rip about that. They don't even like Joe Biden. They just really don't like Trump, right? And he's just sort of a placeholder, and he's not even going to be consequential. You know, they don't even think he's there. They don't care. They just know it's not Trump. So are they looking at Hunter? Do they care about any of this stuff? Does it matter? If they even heard about it. I guess my point on the share of voice thing is, does it even leave the pie, right? Does it even go in? Does this story even exit, the right-wing truth sphere and work its way into the bubble and start to sort of crack the bubble? Now, I am extremely grateful for what Elon has done, and the fact that he is sort of doing this, I think, is incredible. And this is part, I think, of a long-term strategy. Now, he's getting some criticism, for some of this stuff. People are saying, "Oh, just release the files, release the whole thing, release the whole hard drive, release the whole email." And Matt Taibbi's getting castigated for being a PR person of the right. I mean, it's really shocking how sort of the criticisms, I think, are missing the mark. I think certainly, I'd like to see the full hard drive. I'd like to see the whole thing imaged, uploaded onto Kim.com's mega upload or whatever he has, just to irk everybody. But I think what he's doing here is very smart. It's very strategic. It's very drip oriented. And I think that, it's going to serve him in many ways. It's going to make, the message is the medium, it's the marketing, it's all happening on Twitter. It's bypassing all of the news, conglomerates. So yeah, as much as I'd like him to like WikiLeaks style the whole hard drive of Twitter, he's going to be milking this thing for a long time. And every time he does that, right, it's a content mill for Twitter. He can monetize the whole thing through ads, right? All of the traffic is driving, right? It's sort of being monetized. He'll probably continue to roll out features. Oh, we have a reception. Oh, maybe a wedding here. Oh, shout out to Nate and Emily. Hi there. So, Elon will be just milking this for all it's worth and just slow drip, death by 1,000 cuts. And every time he releases this, right? So he'll probably release maybe a Substack competitor or like a New York Times competitor, right? Although, Substack's kind of a favorable free speech platform. They're probably a little bit nervous about some of these new features. But if Elon, does long form tweets or video tweets or starts competing with these big tech platforms as he keeps sort of dripping this juicy stuff, he can really gather a lot of impressions, watch time. And because I think on one of his spaces, Elon hopped on a Twitter space from his jet, I think. And I didn't listen to the full thing, but I think it had like 1 million listeners or something concurrent. I don't know if it was 1 million concurrent or whatever, but huge numbers. But I guess the point is, right, it's in that bubble. Elon is helping to shatter the stranglehold, because a lot of people, ordinarily would go to Twitter, like the journalists would go to Twitter, and the journalists would write in the big tech platforms. So all of the journos are on, El Wapo, Bloomberg, all of them are on there. They're just copying and pasting crap from one another. They get the same sources that we get. I just show you the documents. They don't. They go to Twitter to get their stories, their talking points, and then they just copy and paste it all over the place. And now Elon's just saying, well, people are just going to come to us for the sources now. And Taibbi is not even pulling you off to Substack. He's keeping it right on a Twitter thread. All right, so you can see why they don't want to talk about this stuff, why it's so quiet, why it's in their interest to just ignore. And when you see something that's where the strategies ignore, it's not even respond, it's not lampoon, it's just ignore. It's interesting because I think that means a lot of people are bracing for impact. Right? Ignore is the best strategy when you still need more information. If you don't need more information, you can come to a decision. Ignore buys you a little bit of time. See how long we can hold off on this thing. And so I was thinking tomorrow specifically to go through and take a look at who has not responded on some of these Twitter accounts. What Republicans have not responded to this or condemned this, right? Said, I demand investigations. They promised us all sorts of investigations. Now, one of the criticisms that I've seen, which I think is more to be revealed, and the criticism is about the Twitter thread, not about the actual reality, because on our channel we've covered many times the interface between the government and these big tech platforms. We've seen Jen Psaki say, oh yeah, no, we have meetings and we flag things, and we've played those clips. We've played the clips about the Disinformation Governance Board. We know that there was a disgusting relationship between the FBI, the DOJ, and all of the big tech platforms. And they even basically were acknowledging it. I mean, Psaki was acknowledging this stuff from the press briefing room at the White House. And we have partners over there, and they were justifying it all under COVID. And this was saving lives, right? People were going to literally be dying if they don't do this stuff. So everybody let them get away with it. Well, the problem is that's an abridgment of people's First Amendment rights. And Eric Schmidt from Missouri is doing a tremendous job with some others suing, and he got a deposition with Elvis Chan, who we talked about previously, sat down with him, got a deposition with Fauci. Psaki's scheduled for a deposition maybe this week, I think. And they're all responsible for putting the thumb down upon the social media companies. So the criticism is that, well, Taibbi wasn't really referencing anything in his Twitter thread that was directly related to the government putting their thumb upon Twitter. Instead, it was the Biden administration, right? The Biden administration instead said, this is problematic, flag these. Somebody else responded, handled these. And they were just, it was a disgusting relationship between the Democratic Party and big tech, certainly. But that's kind of two private entities, right? And you would just say, well, that's disgusting that Twitter would do that. Yeah, certainly, but they don't care, right? I mean, if it was still being run by, they didn't care as much as 2 months ago. I don't think they still care. They all were open, acknowledging that they shouldn't have censored the Hunter Biden story, but they did anyways. And honestly, they'd do it again. They would do worse if they could get away with it. And they may have. We don't know. This is probably just the tip of the spear, right? Unfortunately, Elon Musk doesn't have the finances to buy Facebook and Google and YouTube and all of the other platforms and see how much of a impact they had. We just get to see a very surface level topical snapshot. But I'm sure that you could extrapolate this across every other platform, every other media, and then ask yourselves what that did to people's psyches as they went into those polling booths. And if they would have known the truth, would that have caused them to pull a different lever? It's pretty amazing that this stuff is happening right here in our country and that people are openly championing it. I saw somebody say, I'm a free speech absolutist. Not me, they said this about themselves. And I've used that term. I said, yeah, I'm basically that, depending on how you define that. There are some people who will say that even, incitement to violence and that type of stuff is appropriate. I don't go that far. Right? I think that it can be very dangerous to incite people to violence, right? In certain scenarios, in certain crowds, in certain numbers, in certain volumes, right? That really can cause harm and death. And I think the Supreme Court has reasoned through that, right? And we've got case law supporting that. It seems like a reasonable thing. You think about the utility of speech. And if something is, just about death and destruction and burning things down imminently, and it's not, it's really going to imminently cause death, right? This gets spicy and dicey, but as a general rule, good morning. As a general rule, that's a line that I'm okay talking about, whereas others are not. But I think the point is, that is a that is just a tiny distinction, almost one without a difference in the current context. Like if you put all of this stuff on a spectrum and you said, okay, sort of what did the founders envision? What did, what does Elon envision? Where's he at on the spectrum? What does the far left envision? They're over here. Can't say anything offensive, can't talk about anything that's not CDC approved. It's got to be written in a textbook that's signed by Anthony Fauci. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense or truth. Anything that the government says is accurate. We love whatever, right? What's the spectrum? What are you allowed to say? And you can basically plot that even from Twitter. Like, how did they allow this to go? And so it's moving this direction, certainly. But I don't think necessarily all the way to, a free speech absolutist position. Take a look at what happened with Kanye and how that image, which was just an image, was considered to be incitement to violence. And I think that's sort of a stretch. But you get the point. There's the sense that we have to say free speech absolutist and sort of argue about it. The base layer, the base standard has moved. We're now talking about, rather than default freedom of speech, we're talking about working back to the default of free speech. We're not starting at free speech in many people's eyes. Platforms, in other words, don't start with free speech, they start with protection. And then we talk about, rather than how everybody can participate, how only those who are safe and responsible and meaningful can participate, right? It's the default is optimized for safety and security over free speech in many people's minds, like a standard. Now, not in mine, not in yours, I know. Because I was born and taught, and I've been capable of what I think is reasoning and coming to a conclusion that without free speech, the history books and my own experience shows that we lose freedom. We lose our ability to self-actualize, to be ourselves. If we can't talk, if we can't communicate, the most expressive part of being a human is taken from you. So it's critical that we all have that, no matter what. But other people have been born and bred into a different ideology. But that's not what's important, that your safety is important, that your feelings are important, that not being offended is important, or being triggered, or whatever it is. And it's hard to reconcile those two worldviews because they're fundamentally it's like incompatible operating systems. But I think that as the informational supply chains are being rewritten, as Elon starts to crack the bubble, we'll start to see some real progress on this. It is literally like people waking up. How many people didn't even know about this story or hearing about it for the first time? I heard a bunch of people in Twitter spaces going, "This is unbelievable. I didn't know this was even happening. Are you kidding me?" And we've long gone through and reviewed many of these materials. Maybe not the primary source documents, but we've known about a lot of it. But there were many people who were just out. This is, saying this is time for investigations, and we have to reveal all of this. And you've got guys like Garrett Ziegler over at Marco Polo, right? Who's got 500 plus pages on this stuff. I think it's incredible that more and more people are seeing it, and Elon is being, I think, extremely tactical by dripping it. You don't want to open the floodgates because everybody will be desensitized and everybody will, I think, lose the flavor. It's like a buffet. If you serve everybody this endless buffet, can they really appreciate that one amazing dish? So no, we'll just do courses. We'll just, you sit back and relax. We'll just serve you this one, and then this one, and then this one. And I think it's very important that he, Elon, and everybody who is spreading the message, right? The people hosting the spaces, the people who are really digging on this, and there's been a lot of people who are coming out and really covering, Julie Kelly wrote a book about it, Miranda Devine wrote a book about it, Garrett Ziegler I already mentioned, right? Many others who have been digging on this. And man, they've been looking for somebody to just put a flag up and say, all right, we're on it. And there were some Republicans have tried, not the mainstream Republicans, Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, and they could have been pounding their fists on the table over this stuff, but they haven't been. It takes one guy to buy a tech company to finally reveal some of the truth about the disgusting innards of all of these relationships. And he's got a big flagpole. A lot of people are seeing this. And I think it's important to support those who have been doing a lot of the foundational work, holding the feet to the fire on this. So if you're not following those people already, and the people who are in those spheres, I'd encourage you to do that. Because I think, even if let's say Joe bows out and, he was just a placeholder to sort of limp across the finish line to make sure Trump was removed, that's all fine. In other words, a full assault on Hunter and all of this stuff may damage Joe enough that they just say, okay, you're ejected. But this is not about Joe. This is about an infrastructure that exists, that they started building after 2016 to essentially weaponize the entire process. And so Joe's just going to be the current figure. Whoop, they slot in. The next person's going to have that same infrastructure. And so this story, this revelation, is opening up eyes to this infrastructure. And the more people that know about it, the more people that recognize it, the more I think people will see this is not appropriate at all. And even if they're not partisan people, they'll say this is inappropriate. And that's good. Very, very good. It's something this country needs. And so grateful to Elon and Matt and everybody who was working on this story for publishing it, but everybody who was doing the heavy lifting for all of these years, because people have been on this story for since well before the election, pounding the table about it. It's finally coming out, so incredible. But we'll get into it a whole lot more tomorrow on the live stream. We'll get it all mind mapped up and we'll spend some time on it. And the tentacles on this thing go so far, so we'll see what else Elon has for us as the drops continue. But I hope you are having an amazing weekend, my friends. You can see not a ton of sun out here, but it is beautiful. We do like when we get these little bouts of rain. We always need it. The desert gets pretty dry, so things green up a bit. But whatever it is you're doing, wherever it is you are, I do hope you're wrapping up a beautiful weekend, getting outside, getting some fresh air, or staying inside, staying comfy, but exercising those lungs with a 4-7-8 breathing pattern and making it a great day. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye-bye.